Well, again, so good to see everybody today. If we haven't met, my name's Terry Smith. I'm the lead pastor here at the Life Christian Church. So very, very glad you're here. To everybody watching us online, so glad you're with us today. I'm going to do a little bit of a different, actually a lot of a bit. What I'm going to do today is different than what I would typically do or whoever else is teaching would typically do in terms of communicating this morning. And that is that instead of the normal in-depth teaching that I or someone else would offer, I today am going to be spending time doing a vision cast. You might remember, those of you who are TLCC people and who track with us around these kinds of things, that this past fall, typically on the first Sunday of December, we have what we call Vision Sunday. And once a year, kind of lay out our vision, thinking about the next year. But every few years, and it's been a few years, I will take some time at important junctures in the life of our church to kind of lay out a bigger picture of our future and a sense of where we're going as a local church. And so last year, I said instead of doing our normal Vision Sunday, we were going to move that forward, and we were going to do a little bit of an elongated vision season here at TLCC. And so this week, next week, and the following week, we're going to be talking about different parts of what I'll introduce today. I know, for those of you who are part of the Life Christian Church, that you love your church and you care about what we're doing and where we're going. If you're new to us, we're so glad you're here. I hope that you will be inspired as well. I also want you to know that what I'm going to be doing today is a little bit different than what might normally happen on a Sunday, okay? And one other thing I want to say, I didn't plan to say this today, but because I had a number of people ask me about this in the lobby between services, I think I probably need to communicate this. I think a lot of you are aware, because you see it on social media and so on, that I have a new book coming out. And I think folks are wondering why we've not done some kind of book release signing thing like we normally do when I have a new book coming out. That's coming, but it's going to happen 4 weeks from today, just so you know. And then we're going to do a series along with, actually there are churches all over the country who are going to be doing a series based on my new book called The Lord Give You Peace. We're going to be doing that leading up to and through Easter. Okay, and so just so you can know that, I've got people, evidently Amazon's already sending books to people, even though the book it's not supposed to be in retail stores until Tuesday. Somebody brought me a book to sign this morning. Always happy to sign a book, but there's just some confusion around that, and I don't want anybody to ever be confused around anything to do with me. I'm confused a lot, but I don't want to confuse you. So, there is a cautionary tale that is found in the Old Testament about the king named Hezekiah, king of Judah, Hezekiah. You know, it's always going to be an exciting day when the pastor starts by talking about Hezekiah. Hezekiah ascended to the throne of Judah in 715 BC. And he reigned for 29 years. And on the whole, he was a good man and an exemplary leader. But his legacy was marred by short-sighted selfishness in the twilight of his life. He had been miraculously and famously now healed from a grave illness and had been given an astonishing promise that his life would be extended for several years. But then he got caught up in some pride, and he showed off his plenteous treasures to some emissaries from Babylon. And Babylon at that time was a rising power and were seen as a threat to their neighbors, and Hezekiah clearly made a mistake by showing the treasures off to these Babylonian emissaries who later would come and actually steal them and carry them back to Babylon. Isaiah the prophet, a contemporary of Hezekiah, was not happy with what Hezekiah had done, and he prophesied to him that those treasures that he had shown off would someday be pillaged by the Babylonians, and that in the exile that would follow, Hezekiah's own sons would excruciatingly suffer. And when you read the story, it's really terrible what's going to happen to Hezekiah's children, and particularly his sons. Hezekiah's response to that prophecy is astounding. I should just say a little bit more that what Isaiah said is he said to Hezekiah, Hezekiah, during your lifetime there's going to be peace, but your sons and daughters are going to be taken by the Babylonians, and they're going to suffer. And Hezekiah's response to this is just, it's amazing. He says, 2 Kings 20:19, the word of the Lord that you have spoken is good. There will be peace and security during my lifetime. So it's amazing that this fundamentally decent person and successful leader would find this prophecy good. Again, he was promised peace during his lifetime, but the next generation, his own children, would lose everything and suffer exile and other unspeakable atrocities. Put simply, Hezekiah did not appear to care about who was next. He had been given life. In fact, he's been given a new lease on life. But he did not care about the lives of others, even his own children, at least not to the extent that he should have. He did not care about who was next. Jesus taught us that we're supposed to love each other the way he loved us. And he set the standard for what that kind of love looks like when he said, greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Great love is shown when we think about more than just ourselves. We are never just supposed to care about what we have. We're also supposed to care about what others have or don't have. And this is especially true when it comes to the new life we've been given, life in all of its fullness and everything that means. We are supposed to help others have it too. And one of the many things that I love about the people of this church over now more than the 3 decades I've been serving you, one of the many, many things I love about the people of this church is that there has always been a willingness to not just be content with what we have, but to always think about who's next, and to be willing to sacrifice for who's next, to lay down our lives for others. Our mentality has always been, hey, we've been blessed. Who's next? Who's the next person to receive what we've been so graciously given? And that mentality has been expressed in many ways over many years by the people of this church. Today, I want to introduce a new vision emphasis called the Who's Next Project. The Who's Next Project. I say vision emphasis because what I'm going to talk about today, and what we'll talk about in some different ways over the next couple of weeks, is one part of a large vision here at TLCC. Just for some perspective, this past summer, we brought an organizational slash church consultant, actually a renowned church consultant, in to spend 3 days There was a lot of pre-work around this. There's a lot of post-work around this. But he spent 3 days with the leaders of our staff team in a strat ops process, thinking about how to move from where we are now to where we believe God is leading us in our future. And one of the things that I was tasked to do as the lead pastor, after spending a considerable amount of time in prayer and in consultation with the other leaders of our church, was to come up with an I imagine document. And I wrote an I imagine ellipsis by 2030 document that had 22 vision statements in it. And these spoke to different parts of what we believe we're called to do. Some of these 22 statements had to do with things we're already doing that we know that we feel called to do much better. And then a number of those statements spoke about things we are not yet doing that we feel called to do. I say that to say that when I talk about vision emphasis today, I'm talking about what we feel is important now and what we should be emphasizing now, but it's not all that we feel is important or all that we're emphasizing as it concerns envisioning our future. There are a lot of things we're thinking about, and all of these things are in support of our mission here at TLCC. And most of you are very familiar with what our mission here is at TLCC. Our mission is to inspire people to the life God dreams for them as we spread His love in ever-widening circles. That's what we get up to do every day, to inspire people to the life God dreams for them as we spread His love in ever-widening circles. And so all the vision stuff is in support of that mission. The Who's Next project, which I'm going to begin to detail over the next few minutes, is the part of our TLCC vision, again, that we, meaning myself as a lead pastor, our board and elders, and our staff team, believe that we're to focus on now. And you'll hear more about this, again, over the next few weeks. And my hope is that you will join with us in your concern for who's next. In fact, my prayer is that you will join with us in our concern for who's next. So what do we mean when we talk about who's next? And, what are we thinking about? And what are some of the actions we intend to take? Let me offer 3 who's next considerations and actions. The first one, and really the primary thing on our minds right now when we think about who's next, is the next generation. We don't want to be like Hezekiah, who was happy that things would be good as long as he was alive. We want to think about those who will come after us and make sure that what they have is even more and better. So we have a desire to get much, much better at something we already do very well, and that is to support families and children by focusing on the next generation. Part of how we intend to do this is to have a comprehensive plan in place and to execute that plan to minister to a child from the time they enter our nursery, which is in a season right now of being dramatically improved. But from the time they enter our nursery until they finish their education and are launched into their area of destiny. We also want to more holistically and intentionally serve those who are raising the next generation. We want to better serve parents and support marriages at all stages. When we talk about family ministries and when we talk about supporting marriages, that's not limited just to married couples who have children or who have children at home. Our intention is to support marriages in whatever stage that marriage is in. And while we already have amazing and always improving ministries to children and youth through K-Port, our children's ministry, and Club 6, our catechism for sixth graders, and Redline, our youth ministry, and more. We want to be more systematic in what we are doing and to add ministries for college-age students and young adults. And we always want to be asking a set of questions about the children and young people we're serving, which is, what do we want the next generation to know? What do we want the next generation to have experienced? What do we want the next generation to be practicing as they, at some point, leave that season of their life and enter into adulthood and hopefully live the life God dreams for them? What do we want them to know? How are we programming in terms of the impartation of knowledge? What do we want them to experience? We had 60 kids who just got back from a youth camp up someplace in upper New York, and I've been hearing stories from families about what their kids experienced there in terms of growing in their relationship with God. We want to ask systematically, what do we want them to know? What do we want them to experience? And then what do we want them to be practicing? By the time that they go to college, we hope that we've done a better job than we've done heretofore, though we've done a good job. We'll do a better job of preparing those kids to go to college and enter the societal craziness that they will most assuredly face, and their new independence, being equipped well for that, and to be practicing spiritual habits that will help increase the likelihood of their success in every way. And I also want to add that when we think about families, we also have in our mind single adults and our desire to support single adults in the uniqueness of their familial reality. Guys, let's acknowledge that it's hard in today's world. I think it's probably always been hard, but it's more difficult than ever to raise a God-fearing, Christ-honoring family whose kids follow Jesus and live out Christian values. And I'm telling you that the commitment of this church is that we are going to do everything we can to help you succeed in this. So, when I first introduced this vision emphasis at the end of 2023 in our Vision Sunday then. What I'm going to introduce today is to kind of give a little update and then to talk about the next iteration that has a pretty significant physical manifestation to it. When I first introduced this, now a little over a year ago, one of the ways I illustrated our intention around this was by interviewing Julian and Lauren Rivera, who most of you know. Both of their parents' lives were impacted dramatically when they came here to the Life Christian Church. Jesus rocked their worlds, and this life-giving church rocked their worlds as well in the most positive ways possible. Julian and Lauren were raised here at the Life Christian Church. Julian from the time he was a young child, Lauren from the time she was a young teenager. Their faith was developed here. They met here. They married here. When I interviewed them, Lauren was pregnant with Juniper. And I made this commitment to them. I committed to them that I wanted them to know that the Life Christian Church is thinking and planning for that unborn child, just like we thought about your parents and just like we thought about you. I told them we're thinking about and planning to invest in and doing everything we can as a church to come alongside you from the time your daughter is born until she's prepared to live the life God dreams for her and goes off into her adulthood. We were making a promise to a child who was not yet born. What we were saying was, she is next. And even though some of us, for instance, I will not be the lead pastor here when Juniper heads off into her adulthood. I can assure you of that. Don't worry. I'm not going to stick around that long, okay? But we're going to think about those who come after us. This is and a real chord was struck in the heart of our church around that. And those of you here will remember that. Well, let me tell you today another intergenerational story that I hope will make this point to you. Years ago, some 20 plus years ago, Sandy Childs, a single mom, a clinical social worker, and licensed family counselor, came to the Life Christian Church. One of the things I always like, by the way, to say about Sandy is that Sandy marched with Martin Luther King Jr. I always find that a fun thing to say about Sandy. She's a really amazing woman. Sandy's life was really impacted by this church, and she prayed and invited her adult son, Russ, to come. And Russ did come not long after Sandy was here. And Russ's life was transformed by Jesus and by his relationship with the Life Christian Church. And Russ, if you haven't met him, Russ is a television producer of a number of shows that you would have heard of and watched and are highly regarded. And he's one of our board members here at the Life Christian Church. And then Russ married Lauren. Lauren has been and is a wonderful part of our church family for many years. Lauren is a teacher. And they birthed and brought into this church from infancy to now teenagehood and young adulthood, two beautiful daughters, Julia and Shalom. Julia is about to go to college. She is following her parents, both of whom attended Ivy League colleges, to an Ivy League school. She's a really sharp young woman. She interned on our staff team last year in our children's ministry, and we thought that it would be a nice thing for you to just kind of hear a little bit of their story and get a little bit of perspective on what we mean when we're talking about who's next in light of the next generation. You'll watch this for about 4 minutes.
Hi, my name is Sandy Childs. TLCC has been my church home since 2003 and the church home of my son Russ and my granddaughter Julia.
I've been coming to TLCC for my whole life. Growing up in Cape Port has been so essential for my time at TLCC, and it really showed me from the beginning that TLCC was going to be my strongest community for my whole life. After I finished Cape Port, after 5th grade, I went to Club 6. I got to learn all about the Bible and all about Christianity, and that was really powerful for me. And then I went into Red Line, which I've been in for 5 or 6 years, I think, at this point.
From my perspective as a parent, Red Line has been absolutely essential to her health and well-being as she's grown through middle school and high school. You know, just another way to kind of connect to God and her spiritual growth. It was just tank filling and life-giving for her in a way that, I think without it, her experience through middle school and high school would have been very, very different.
I'm really, really glad that I've had TLCC throughout my high school years, and I've had Red Line, and they've taught me the values that I can use as I go off to college at Dartmouth in the fall. And something that was really important to me when I was looking for a college was looking where I can find a Christian community similar to what I have at church here and what I have in Red Line at my college. And I think the church really taught me that a Christ-centered community is the most important community that I can have. And so I'm really looking forward to finding that in college and, finding similar values to what I've had at church, because these are just so important to me.
They will be making decisions that are based on the values that they learned here. When they are thrown out there into the world, they don't have to feel like they have to be influenced. They can be the influencer in helping their peers make decisions. It's just so impactful.
I mean, my kids love Jesus. Like a lot. I feel like on some level, if I've done nothing at all correctly as a parent, just giving them the opportunity to get to know Jesus through the platforms, what TLCC offers, it's all right, they're gonna be fine. We did that. They've got that. Then if they've got that, they can launch from there. Then God's got them and everything's gonna be okay. It's kind of how I feel about it.
I know that TLCC is making such an effort to really invest in the next generation, invest in children, and I'm so excited to see how that takes place far into the future. I've always wanted to be able to raise my own kids at TLCC because I've had such a great experience growing up at TLCC, and I just want for them something that would be exactly the same.
The impact that the Life Christian Church has had on my kids cannot be overstated. And I think about just, the strong foundation, that she's got built through Life Christian Church. I think about even just her spiritual growth as a student of the Lord, right? And as a follower of Jesus, it can't be overstated. It's priceless.
I'm so grateful that my grandmother, Sandy, came to TLCC first, invited my father, and that my father and my parents have been so dedicated to, bringing me up in the church and every single Sunday bring me here above anything else. I hope that for my kids and for all the other kids and families that are going to come to TLCC in the future, they're going to have an even better experience than what I got to have.
As a grandparent, I have been so happy to see that my grandchildren are living out in their age-appropriate ways what they're learning here. The impact of this church on their lives will be something that they'll take few generations. When I'm long gone, their children, their grandchildren will be living it out wherever they are. Our lives, I know that my life and therefore their lives would not be the same were it not for TLCC.
I'm excited about the idea that TLCC is putting an even greater focus on serving families, because I know how essential the family ministries have been for my family.
Wow. So, we have many, many stories like this. And our prayer is for thousands more stories like this in coming years. And some of us, we're not going to be here to see the fruit of those efforts. But we're called to care about who's next, regardless. So at the end of 2023, then, we laid out when I first introduced this vision emphasis, we laid out two immediate objectives regarding the next generation piece of who's next. First of all, we said that we wanted to hire a family pastor. Obviously, and always, leadership is everything. And we searched far and wide to find a world-class family pastor. And we found her on our staff. Amanda Smith has been on our team for over a decade and has won at everything she's done these many, many years. Agreed. The reason it took a while is it took a while to convince her. She already had a lot of responsibilities. She continues to be our online campus pastor, but now she's taken on this family pastor responsibility, and we will begin to see the impact of her leadership as she leads our K-Port staff and our Red Line staff, and as we continue to build this out, you'll begin to see the impacts of her efforts in coming months in very significant ways. And you're going to hear a little bit from her next week, as well as several others of us. And then we said that as a big next step that we wanted to launch an Awana Club. Awana is the largest child discipleship ministry in the world, and they've proven successful over many, many years at helping teach children Scripture and the values that flow from it. And we launched our Awana Club just a few months ago, and we now have, between the ages of 6 and 11, some 70 children registered in Awana, where parents are bringing their kids here every week for the purpose of learning Scripture. So, wow. I mean, what could, and by the way, let me just pause for a moment and take off my kind of organizational leader hat for a minute and be really pastoral for a moment and meddle just for a second, okay? So when you see the story of the Russ and Lauren Hammond family, and you see Julia's story, here's something really important to note. They live in Harlem. Yet their kids have fully participated in our children's ministry and our youth ministry, which is to say that that Russ and Lauren have made a tremendous commitment to avail themselves of the efforts of the church to serve their family. To which I say, guys, if you want this to work for you, it can't just be us making a commitment to your family. You're going to have to make a commitment to the church. You're going to have to show up. And at some point, you're going to have to decide. I know that this is challenging. Guys, I love you. And I know this is challenging. And I know parenting and family life is challenging on all kinds of levels. Sharon and I, we've raised 3 children to adulthood who they were very active and engaged in all the sports. And both of our boys went on to play college football. And we know all the things that are pulling at parents, okay? But let me just say, at some point, you're going to have to decide. Is it more important for your kids to grow in their life with God? Or is it more important that they, play on yet another travel team? At some point, you have to make some decisions. And so when parents, and I think you can figure out how to do both things. I'm not telling you your kids should quit sports. I'd be a hypocrite if I told you that. I'm glad. I hope they're doing great. I hope they're winning. I hope, I'm all for all of that. But at some point, we have to decide what's most important. And we want to be able to sit there when we're parents and give a testimony like Russ just did and have one of our kids say, essentially the most important thing in my life is my relationship with Jesus Christ. And as parents, we've got to navigate our way through that successfully. Again, I'm not saying it's easy. When I say something like this, I want to put my arms around you and say, I love you, and I understand the struggle. You can figure it out. Just make sure that you make your commitment to what the church offers. Whether you're part of this church or part of another church that's offering things to serve your children, you're going to have to, make the trip from Harlem to West Orange every week if your kids are going to be impacted by what's happening here. Everybody still love me after I said that? Or did you maybe say, I didn't love you anyway? Don't. All right, so we launched Awana. Now I'm announcing that an exciting new next step for this part of Who's Next. And this is a very, very significant thing that's going to allow us to really elevate our programming to children and young people. I'm always happy when I get to use a laser pointer, and this is a laser pointer moment. On the screen behind me, you will see a project that we're calling the First Floor Next Gen and Adult Learning Renovation. And so I realize that there probably are a number of you who've never actually even been down to the first floor. But you should know that below us is a room about this size about the size of the lower level, including the stage. And that is essentially this area, and it's about a 10,000 square foot area that at present is one large room that we call our conference center. And then from here and all the way over here into the drums is our existing K-port, which is about 10,000 square feet as well. There are about 20,000 square feet on the first floor. And when this building was first designed, it was designed in order to have the absolute best experience for our children and young people. It was designed with a children's auditorium in it connected to K-port. But to make a long story short, when we built this building, we couldn't afford to finish the second and third floors, and so we initially just moved into the first floor. As a consequence, we didn't build out the rest of K-port, but we left that space open, and that's where we had our worship services for the first, 2, 3, 4 years that we were here as we raised the rest of the money necessary to finish the second floor and then the third floor. Consequently, this really never, our vision for this has not really been completed. And as we've started to make this new emphasis on the next generation and family ministries, I have become convicted that we need to finish what we said we were going to do when we first announced our vision, which was to make sure that we have the absolute best facilities possible to program at a very high level to meet the needs of our children on Sunday mornings and then our young people in the midweek. And so the intention is to take that 10,000 square feet and to attach a 175-seat children and youth theater to the existing K-Port that's already all over here. Just to locate you, when you guys register your kids for K-Port, you go down these stairs and you come here to this to a check-in station that's not really a very good check-in station right now. We're going to fix all that. We're going to create a whole new check-in area, a whole new experience, much more efficient, much more secure. And then this is where you go back into K-Port as it presently exists. And this is where, or the auditorium now, on Sunday morning, this is going to be great space for the children. And then in the midweek for Redline, we're going to use environmental lighting and other technologies to be able to completely change this space to be an amazing youth space connected to a youth game room that will be just for our kids, our young people, on midweek and whenever they want to use it. We want this to become the hangout for our kids, a positive place, positive values to come and have fun. As of right now, our Redline ministry, which is our youth ministry, they meet here once a week on Wednesday. And just so you can get an idea of this, let's say there are about 70 of them. They meet here in this room, and this room seats about 700 people. It's not an optimal meaning thing to have 70 kids filling a few rows in a room this size, and they temporarily set up a game room outside in the lobby, which isn't ideal as well. They break things. We don't really care about. We care about them more than break things. But anyway, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Now they're going to have a permanent space downstairs, and they're going to have access from it directly into this theater. So when the young people come on a Wednesday night or whatever night, they'll walk through here, and this is their world back here. And on Sunday mornings and at other times, Awana and so on, then this whole gigantic space will be there to serve all of our children, okay? And you'll also see there's an existing kitchen down there that we're gonna make to where it opens out into a really great cafe that the kids can use on a Sunday morning or at night. And I don't know, we may even let adults in here every once in a while, but I doubt it. And then as a part of this, we also, you'll hear next week, we also have a vision emphasis around a whole new phase of adult learning. Learning that will help adults grow in their lives with God. And believe it or not, in this building, as it has been built, we actually have only one classroom in this building, which is the classroom out there. And so we're going to address that need by these are beautiful. These walls are all windows all the way along the exterior of the building. And along the exterior of the building, we're going to grab some space and create some really beautiful adult learning spaces as well. We're going to increase our adult learning spaces to now from one classroom, the glass room, to now 5. Now, there are other spaces we use for adult learning. We do things all over the building. There's a conference room upstairs and so on. But this is going to be, again, my family's teasing me because I'm using the word world class a lot right now. This is going to be world class space for adults to learn in as well. But the key point is this space for children and young people is going to be spectacular, and it's going to kind of force our children's and youth programming to be raised to a level that's much more creative, innovative, and effective than even what they're doing right now. So, thank you. Thank you. All right, so that's the first thing. Thank you. That's the first thing we're talking about when we're talking about who's next. It's more than facilities. There's this whole other thing around it, but the facilities are going to facilitate all the programming that we want to do as we think about what do we want kids to know, to experience, and to be practicing as they're launched into successful lives. Is everybody doing okay? That was the longest part of what I have to say, but I'm not done, of course. You know that I'm not done. That would be shocking. Have to take people to the hospital with shock if I was done. Here's the second thing. The second action and consideration, consideration and action around who's next. Here's the other primary thing we're thinking about when we're thinking about who's next. We're thinking about the next person. The next person. I just want to remind you of something that's very important to who we are as a church. We probably don't talk about enough, but it's important, I think, that you hear my heart around this. And if Sharon were speaking to this, she would share her heart around it as well. The reason that we decided that we did not want to spend our ministry lives in the Bible Belt of our upbringing, which would have been a lot easier, is because we wanted to preach the gospel where, in proportion to the Bible Belt, it was not being widely preached, and we wanted to build a great church where there were not many great churches. Now, many of you have heard the story that when I was a teenager, I felt God call me to build a great church in a suburb of New York City before I ever came to New York City. So there's that informing all of this. But then over the years, into our 20s, as my ministry kind of took off and I was preaching all over the country in great churches all over the country, and God was kind of shaping me in terms of what I really was going to spend my life doing. I came to know that I did not want to fulfill my pastoral ministry in a Bible Belt context. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people who feel called to do that, and I say, God bless them. I'm thankful for them. But when we came to West Orange, the largest Bible-believing church in West Orange, a suburb of New York City of 50,000 people, the largest Bible-believing church at that time was a church of maybe 70 people. And even today in West Orange, 34 years after we came, there are still only 3 or 4, for lack of a better word, Bible-believing churches that are preaching the good news about Jesus Christ as it's taught in Scripture. Some people might want to use the word evangelical, which technically is correct, but I am concerned about its association now in the political conversation. So I'll just say Bible-believing church, okay? And our church is many times larger than the next largest West Orange congregation of what we would call a Bible-believing church. Well, to us, it's challenging. It was exciting. It was crazy. I could have accepted the pastorate of a large church in the Midwest as a 29-year-old guy. I had lots of opportunities. We felt called here because we wanted to preach the gospel where there wasn't a church on every corner already. Now, I will say, over the last 34 years, there are many more thriving churches in the New York City metropolitan area than there were 30 years ago. Thank God. There has been, missiologists will say, a revival of sorts in the New York City metropolitan area over the last 30 years. And so I'm thankful. There are a lot of wonderful churches now in the New York City metropolitan area, and there were some wonderful churches 30 years ago, but frankly, not very many. And so what's my point? Well, this is what the Apostle Paul said. He said, "It has always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ was not known, so that I would not be building on someone else's foundation. Rather, as it is written, those who were not told about him will see, and those who have not heard will understand." I say that to make this point. This church has always been a church that cares about reaching the person who has not yet heard the gospel or who is not yet in a life-giving church. We have refused to be about who's already here, but have tried to always care about and reach out to the person that we would say is next. this is part of what we mean when we say, who is next? Who is the next person who needs to hear the good news about Jesus? Who is the next person who needs to learn about and visit and become a part of a life-giving church? It can't ever just be about those of us who are already here and what we already have, but it has to be about those who are not here and who are next. And this really speaks to the mission of Jesus. Jesus said that he came to seek and save the lost. He said, I didn't come for people who are already healthy. I came for people who are sick. I didn't come for people who've already been found. I came for people who need to be found. And I want that, even as we've grown to be a large church and have a lot of good things going on here, to make sure that we never forget that we are here to reach the person who is not yet here. I read a wonderful illustration or something that illustrates this in Adam Grant's book, Think Again. He talked about a team of psychologists who studied how going to outer space, how astronauts who've gone to outer space have a dramatically different perspective and how that they see the world differently. And I'll just read a little bit from Grant here. He said, upon returning from space, astronauts are less focused on individual achievements and personal happiness and more concerned about the collective good. And then he quotes Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who said, you develop an instant global consciousness, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. And then this astronaut says, from out there on the moon, looking back at Earth, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him 250,000 miles out and say, look at that, you son of a... And then I'm not going to say what he said. But I agree with the sentiment. This reaction, Grant writes, is known as the overview effect. Shuttle Commander Jeff Ashby said, in space, the stars look the same as they do on Earth. What is so different is the planet, the perspective that it gives you. Circling the entire planet in 90 minutes, you can easily from space see the connection between someone on one side of the planet to someone on the other, and there are no borders evident. What am I trying to say? We need a heavenly perspective. And I think sometimes that God would like to grab us by the scruff of the neck, lovingly, of course, and say, this is what I see from heaven. I love the whole world. See, friends, we have to remember he loves the whole world, not just you and me and your kids and my kids. He loves everybody's kids. He loves the whole world. And we need to see life from that perspective. He loves your neighbor's kids who's never heard the gospel explained to them as much as he loves your kids. And we have to care in this way about who's next. John 3:16, Jesus said, for God loved the world that he gave his only one and begotten Son. So, with that kind of as a backdrop, here's the practical kind of next step around that in this vision emphasis. And, we're thinking about this in a lot of ways, of course, have been, will, and will continue to. But here's what we're thinking about next. A couple years ago, I introduced our vision to design and erect a glorious work of art, a cross sculpture. I said that we would invest in designing this cross sculpture and then would, when the time was right, and this is that time, come back to the congregation to talk about how to fund it and build it. And that time has come, and we want to connect this cross sculpture in ways that I'm about to explain to the who's next project. Without going into too much detail here, the kind of thing that we will go into detail about at our next church business meeting, which is coming up here in just a few short weeks, where we'll answer questions all night long. Folks want to ask them. But without going into too much detail right here, we announced this as a vision. We hired an artist who designed this cross. We went through a process looking at a number of designs and came to agreement around what this was going to look like. We've hired an architect who has done and is now finishing the technical work necessary to actually build and install this 39-foot tall cross, a cross as tall as our building. And we've also now hired a contractor, a construction manager, the same person who built this building. We've rehired that person, Pat Conquest, who is going to both lead the project of building and installing the cross sculpture and also completing the first floor next-gen renovation. And so we see the cross of Christ, as the most beautiful possible who's next symbol. It is the most perfect representation of God's love for the whole world. And this 39-foot tall cross sculpture is going to stand on the front of our property and invite all who see it to come here and experience the gospel of Jesus in a life-giving church. No one's ever going to drive by this property again and wonder what this building is. They are going to know that this is a church that's focused on the cross of Jesus Christ. And I'm reminded of what Jesus said about being lifted up on the cross. He said, when I'm lifted up from the earth, I'll draw all people to myself. And that's my prayer, is that somehow this cross becomes a spiritual magnet, that as people see it and its beauty and somehow have a sense of what it's about, that it will be an invitation that says, you can come here and hear the story about Jesus Christ and the better life that he wants to bring to you now and forever. So we also see the cross sculpture then, now to get practical practical. We also see this as a meaningful way for all of us to come together to fund both the sculpture itself and connected to it, the first floor, next generation, and adult learning renovation, which leads me to my last, final, and not as long, third, who's next consideration and action. And this is now addressed to all of us. It's a question. Who is next to leave a legacy? Who is next to leave a legacy? So, when this cross is installed, it's going to be installed in the midst of our present walk of faith. And so to locate you in the building, we're talking about this corner of the property up against Vizcaya. And if you've not been out in the beautiful gardens out there, there are a number of paving stones embedded in the courtyard that we call our walk of faith. And that's where, as we were finishing this project and trying to raise the last $500,000 or so, there were a number of people in our congregation who donated $747 so that we could move into 747 Northfield Avenue, and their names or their family names are etched in those stones, hopefully, forever, as far as I'm concerned. And into that, in the middle of that walk of faith now, there's etched a cross. And it's a circle. Well, the foundation of our new cross sculpture is going to be where that present cross etching is, so that this is going to become a part of the walk of faith. And then, as a part of the beautiful garden area that's going to be out there, we're going to install legacy walls, a series of legacy walls. And these walls are going to have in them 4 different sizes of legacy stones. And we're going to give folks an opportunity to make a donation towards the Who's Next project and to have a legacy stone etched either with a family name or with someone that you may want to memorialize. And our intention, our hope, our prayer is to raise at least $1 million that will fund both the cross in its entirety and finishing the first floor in its entirety, cash. Okay? And so when we talk about these different sizes of legacy stones, this is how we're thinking about it. And then I'll take a moment and explain it. And so first of all, we're talking about Legacy 1, which is a gift of $1,000 up to $5,000. Legacy 2, which is a gift of $5,000 up to $10,000. Legacy 3, which is a gift of $10,000 up to $25,000. And Legacy 4, which is a gift of $25,000 or above. And you might say, understandably, why have you decided to do this at 4 different levels? And I'll quickly explain. I think that's an important question to try to answer. And so, first of all, when we first started talking about this broadly, just kind of a few people kind of heard us discussing this. We had a beautiful family in our church. A relatively young family. They were in their mid-50s, they were in their 50s, which seems very, very young to me. And the woman in the family passed away. They were a marvelous family in our church. The husband is still very active in our church. And the husband wanted to memorialize his wife, and he heard about this cross sculpture, and he walked up to me one Sunday morning, he handed me an envelope, and it was a check for $25,000. And he said, Pastor, I want to kind of seed this money into that project, and I want somewhere in this cross project to be able to do something in memory of my wife. And so I thought that kind of heart, that kind of desire speaks of something kind of big, and that there should be an opportunity for people who have that kind of desire to do something really special in this. Now, that's one thing. The second thing is that having these 4 different levels gives people to make an opportunity to make a contribution according to their means. When I talked here a few moments ago about the 747 Walk of Faith project, everybody who participated in that was almost everybody in the church at that time. They gave $747. They gave $747 whether they, make $10 million a year or whether they were unemployed. And though that was what we should have done at that time, I want to change that story this time, and I want to give people who have more capacity and opportunity to, really a challenge to stretch and step up and do something special, and an opportunity to do that. And so we're going 2 weeks from today, Lord willing, we're going to receive pledges for the Who's Next project. And we'll probably receive them the next week as well. But the big day is 2 weeks from today. We're going to receive pledges for the Who's Next project. And the pledge period is going to be from March 2nd of this year up until Easter of 2026, which is the first Sunday of April in 2026. So it's just over a year-long period of time. And I'm making a very simple ask today. I'm asking today that you simply would ask yourself, am I in? Am I in? And then secondly, would you be willing to pray about making a pledge 2 weeks from today that represents an all-inness, that represents generosity, and that I hope represents some level of stretch in your life? I know that Sharon and I are going to step in at the highest level. We're going to memorialize. We've had some folks already begin who've helped us some with this. Thank you so much. But we want to memorialize my dad and mom who we lost last year. And we're hoping, we don't have this perfectly designed yet, so hear this as a hope. We're hoping that there's an opportunity even to, in our case, I'd like to put my dad and mom's ashes in that legacy wall, and I've had some other people express to me similar sentiments. Now, some of us will use this to memorialize someone. Most of us will use this to put our family name or our name there, and maybe a scripture or something, we'll get into those details later, that says, I was one of those people in 2026 who cared. What is this? What year is this? 2025. I'm already there. Who cared about who was next. Guys, I close with this. Over the years, every time we've come to a place to make room for who is next, there's been a group of people who've stepped up to sacrifice to make it happen. I wish I had time to tell some stories now, but I don't. I've used my time. You've listened well. I'm grateful, and we're going to wrap things up quickly here in a moment, okay? But from the very beginning, when Sharon and I first came here, there were about 50 beautiful people meeting in the basement of Holy Trinity Church on Main Street. The smelly basement. God bless my friends. I'm sure they fixed it by now. The smelly basement at that time of Holy Trinity Church, where now we serve in Christine's Kitchen. We serve the hungry there regularly as a church congregation. That's where our church was meeting. And we moved from there to a succession of rented spaces, none of them really suitable for a church. The West Orange Community House, we were there for probably 3 years. And then we finally had our opportunity to purchase our first building. But we didn't have the money. The first year Sharon and I came, the income of this church was like $70,000. And from that, we were being paid, and all the church bills were everything was being funded out of that. I'm trying to make the point that when we went to the bank and said we want to borrow money to buy this 11,000 square foot old bowling alley, they looked at us and said, almost exact words, we really like you, Pastor, but you don't have the means to fund alone. Now, people started giving towards it and all of that, but the president of the bank at that time, Llewellyn Edison Savings, Jim Smith, the president of the bank, said, if you could get some families in the church to guarantee the loan, we would loan you the money because we fundamentally believe in you. And in my mind, I said, well, that's not going to happen. I don't know if I'm ever going to mention that to anybody. But there was a small group of people and our now nascent board that I mentioned it to, and much to my shock, there were several people who stepped up and said, Pastor, I'm willing to guarantee the loan. And the bank said it had to be attached to the equity on people's homes. And we had, I think, 5 families who stepped up and attached the equity on their homes to that first loan. And one of those families were my parents, my dad and mom. They lived in West Virginia, but they loved this church. They stepped up and did that. Sharon and I didn't own a home. We sold a home in West Virginia, but didn't have enough money to buy a home here, but we put the equity from that home in a savings account. Well, the bank attached the guarantee to the money in that savings account. Sharon and I stepped up and guaranteed the loan as well. You might expect that from us, but the heroes in that were these other folks, like Frank and Denise Korzakowski, legends like this, who are no longer with us. Both have passed away, but they were brand new Christians at the time. Their kids, who now love us, thought they were crazy, which is understandable, actually, as they attached the equity on their home. Well, that was the beginning of, it's been a long time since I've made this kind of an ask here at the Life Christian Church. It was a beginning of people stepping up and saying, every time we came to a place where we needed to make more room for more people stepping up, capital campaign after capital campaign, bonding programs, sacrifice after sacrifice. It took us 4 capital campaigns. Each lasted 3 years, one lasted 2 years. People gave millions and millions of dollars so that we could sit in this room today because they cared about You. They were already happy where we were. We had a good thing going on, but they stretched and sacrificed and cared. This is a simple little thing. How many of you in this room right now were here and gave towards moving into 747? If you were here when we moved into this building and gave towards it, would you stand now? Would you stand right now? Would you stand right now? And stay standing. Wait, stay standing, please. Stay standing, please. I want you guys to look around. Andrea, you were a big part of this. You got to stand up there, okay? I want you to look around because these people were thinking about you. They were thinking about you. And now this is your opportunity. It's been years since we've had some kind of campaign like this. You know, we do our regular tithes and offerings, and I teach about that every once in a while. And then once a year in recent years, we've been doing a Vision Sunday and a Christmas mission offering. But it's been years since I've asked for this kind of commitment. And I'm pleased to be able to do so because I want you to have an opportunity to become a part of the legacy of people at the Life Christian Church who care about who's next. Would you please stand with me? Guys, before Stephanie comes and makes a couple closing comments and I say the benediction, in your seat back pocket, there's a red card. Would you please, would everybody who's a part of TLCC and all the rest of you who want to, would you reach into the pocket and would you grab one of these cards, please? And here's my ask today. I think I've already said it, but I'd like for you now to respond to this if you would. I'd like for you, give whatever information you want, but certainly your name. But first of all, if your heart has responded to what I've said today, would you just mark that first thing that says, hey, Pastor Terry, I'm all in for who's next. Secondly, will you pray about making a pledge for Legacy Stone? That's all I'm asking today. I'm not asking for any pledges. I'm just asking, will you pray? And of course, if you're married, then you're going to want to have conversations with your spouse. Sharon and I have had that conversation already. And then thirdly, I will make every effort to be here and make my pledge on Sunday, March 2nd. I'd like for us to have, break through all this winter dreary stuff where every Sunday we're affected by some weather thing, and all of us to show up together on March 2nd and for us to have a great day where we pledge over $1 million by God's grace so that we can get this cross built, get the first floor renovated to serve our children and young people better. And if you're with me in this, will you take a moment, will you fill this out? In a moment after the benediction, here's what's going to happen after the benediction. The band is going to play the final worship song, and you're free to go, and my expectation is that you'll go. We've been here a little bit longer than I want to be in a Sunday morning service, but at each door, there are going to be hosts standing there with baskets. If you just take that card, drop it in the basket as you leave. Now, if you want to hang out for a while and worship with the band while they sing, you're more than welcome. They're going to sing the house down for a little bit, okay?